Hello, and again, welcome to Bit Depth. I'm Santiago Ramones. Across from me is
Benjamin Rosfeld, also known as Ugly Girl.
Ugly Girl. Where'd that come from?
That is, well, so I'm a DJ as of recent, and everyone needs a DJ like alias. I guess, and at least I wanted one, and I've been wanting an alias for a long time, and lately I have felt the urge. Well, I've always, growing up, I was like, when I grow up, I want to be a woman, but I'm not in this space where I'm like trying to do like the actual physical changes, but to me, I feel like a girl when I'm performing a lot of the times, and so, but I also don't feel like a very pretty girl. So that's where that came from, and I'm proud to be an ugly girl. So there's my long introduction with my alias. My other name is just my regular name.
Yeah. Would you prefer I use?
You can call me Ben. My pronouns. They them is fine.
Okay, yeah. Cool. Yeah. Who is Ben Rosfeld?
Who am I? So I am a musician through and through. I do kind of nothing but music. I grew up with a musical family and was like urged from a young age to play instruments. And since then, like everything that I've chosen to do has really been about pursuing music. So I'm a cellist, a pianist, and synthesizerist. I've built a number of modular synths from parts, and I've curated a pretty good like electronic music studio. I also play in a band called Shift, and Santiago's interviewed Benji Scaloot before, who's also in my band, and yeah. So I also compose. That's what I'm in school for. I'd love to write music for, I mean, part of the reason I play so many different instruments is like, so that I can be familiar with creating sounds through completely different means. Right. And composing is really a great way to do that. And, so that's really, when people ask me like who I am, that's kind of my answer. Is just a musician. I don't have much of a life other than that.
Was there even a moment, but like when did you first, or when did music grab you?
Okay. Yeah. So that's a really good question. So for the longest time I was an actor. I was a little theater kid. I was in musicals, a couple operas, and so like I was like, when I grow up, I am going to be an actor. But really, I mean, my main thing was actually I wanted to make films. So I guess I wanted to be an actor, but also work like in the film industry, specifically. And so in that, I wrote a couple films, I acted in them, directed them when I was quite young. And then in about 8th grade, I made a documentary about electronic music. Because I grew up like listening to electronic music, particularly this artist named Jean-Michel Jarre, who I totally mispronounced that because I'm not a Frenchman, but I was super, super inspired by electronic music. So I decided that for my electronic music documentary, I would write the score for it also. And I was very lucky. My dad is he runs a studio, like a recording studio that has a bunch of electronic music equipment. So he would just let me play around and do stuff on that. And so I realized how much I loved creating music for the films I was making. In fact, way more so than making films. And I have such a passion for movies, and I am such a film critic. but really, when I made that documentary on, it was focusing on the invention of MIDI. But when I made the MIDI documentary, I was like, man, I just want to make music now, and I'm just going to keep doing that. So, from then on, I entered some composition competitions, and just that kind of fueled me to write for a while, and eventually decided to go to undergrad for it, and here we are.
Yeah. Was there even a moment when you were like, I have to do this with my life? Or was it like ever even a question? Like, you know, especially as you're like getting out of high school or something, and it's like, what am I going to do? Am I going to go to college? Am I going to enter the workforce? Am I going to pursue music with all of my things? Or was it never even a question of just like, yeah, of course I'm going to do music?
So frankly, it was just kind of course, because I'd made the decision to compose as my thing when I was, you know, entering high school. And so for like 4 years, like all 4 years of high school, I just wrote music either for myself or just I tried to get friends to play my works, and sometimes it succeeded, sometimes it didn't. But, and I was in a couple different bands in high school. And so like when the college question came up, it actually was an incredibly stressful decision for me, but I knew for a fact that I wanted to major in music composition. There was pretty much no question of like, maybe I should do philosophy or, you know, like, that's been pretty solidly what and I feel very grateful for that. Cause I've, you know, I had a lot of friends who were just like, I have no idea what I'm going to do with the rest of my life. And I think that that's actually a completely okay place to be. And sometimes I question my lack of questioning. I'm just like, wait, I really haven't put much thought into what if I didn't do music. But with as great as music school is, it has pushed me oftentimes to my limit of just like, do I really like doing this? But that is the nature of going to school for what you love, is it will burn you out on it. But that's the point, is it tests you. Like, is this, it forces you to ask, is this worth it? And for me, it is, every time.
Yeah. So yeah, because this is the world that you're immersed in at the moment. And so we're like, kind of know it, but not necessarily specifically with OCU. Tell me about going to school for music. Has it broken you?
Yeah, well, I'm in my last semester, my 8th semester of music school. I'm here and I'm still very happy with my choice. So I don't know if it's fully like broken me, period. But there have been times where the school I go to is a fantastic school. I go to Oklahoma City University. And what's great about this school over many, many institutions, music institutions in particular, is the curriculum and the school environment almost forces you to not be a part of your one thing. And it really, so I have participated a lot in many, many different facets of music beyond just learning how to compose and orchestrate. And what that means for me and many of my fellow students is that we are so involved in so many things that we often just don't have space for our own lives. And it really, it took a lot for me to figure out who I was outside of being a musician, right? Because, you know, I'm playing cello in orchestra and like some other people's ensembles. I'm currently running the composition, like I'm president of the composition sort of program at at OCU, and I'm also trying to write my own pieces. I'm in piano lessons. I have to take organ. I work for a church playing music. Like, there's all these, and I'm not the only one. I mean, this is kind of the musician life in a lot of ways, but it does just. There are times where I have reached beyond my absolute limit, and really, really hurt myself. And actually, it has had an impact on other people around me too, because you have to be able to focus on your relationships in your life. You have to, like, no matter what you do or how incredible it is. I think I've realized this last year or so that the most important thing in a person's life are their relationships. And I think that I'm comfortable making that blanket statement, because your relationships with people really in large part define who you are. So I guess TLDR, yes, I have been pushed to my absolute limit. Many times.
Yes. And yet, the love and the passion for it remains.
Absolutely.
Why? What is it that, like, why are we doing this to ourselves?
Yeah. I mean, you know this life as just as well as I do. Like, I mean, it's being able to be a part of. It's hard. I have a hard time explaining it to other people sometimes, especially like non-musicians, because the way I know music and the way I know my life is, as I've said, I can't imagine what it's like to be dedicated to really anything else. But what's worth it about it is I get to do what I love, and I get to do it. I get to learn how to do it well, and the constant hours and hours of practice and failure that goes into that. When there's a return, like an example today, like just today, I've been working on orchestrating a piece. I've attempted to orchestrate 5 times now. This last time this 5th time is my final, like, I think, successful attempt. But orchestrating is such hard work. You get like about 40 different parts that you're writing for, and you have to make sure that everyone can, stay together. And you have to make sure your part is detailed enough to where there's not any questions about what they have to play or how they have to play it. And there's so much that goes into doing that, and so much stress and part editing so it looks nice, and you have to figure out, what textures do I want? How do I get those textures? How do I not do the same thing for too long? There's all of this. It's just all of this mind-numbing work. And the reason I've given up 4 other times is because it's just been like, I worked for 2 hours and got 2 bars done. Like, finally I did just put my head down, and I was like, okay, I think I've created a piece now where I can see the light at the end of the tunnel. And I did, like, finish it, like notating it. And today we had our first reading of it in the orchestra. And there's some things that I'm definitely changing, because there's some discrepancies and confusions, but like having a room of 40 people, more than 40 people, like looking at your work and playing it and participating in it as a whole, as one, and just being able to auditorily, like, experience that, like, that is fucking awesome. Yeah. I don't really know how else to describe it.
Magic.
It is magical. And I feel the same way about, like, I think my biggest passion project is Shift, my band. And it's such an honor and a privilege to do Shift because it feels like I get to go on stage and just actually be myself. And like, yeah, performers always put on a persona to an extent, but like that persona is a part of my deep self. So I think really to answer your question, what makes it all worth it for me is I get to be myself. I get the permission to be myself and present myself in a way I'm really happy with.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a fucking great game. That's a great game.
Oh yeah. For the listeners, I have 3 screens in my studio, and 2 of them are occupied by partially by like Pro Tools and shit, but like I have wallpapers that rotate through and they're like all video game backgrounds or like sometimes shows or movies.
Right.
But usually trying to just be like backgrounds. And that was Hyper Light Drifter. If you haven't played Hyper Light Drifter, you should.
If you haven't, and in at the least, you should listen to the soundtrack. It's
disaster piece. So good.
It's maybe my favorite game soundtrack out there. Like, oh my God, it's so good.
Yeah. So the question I'm about to ask, I usually frame it differently, but since you're in music school, this is sort of how you will kind of look at it anyways, which is I usually ask like, what's a deep or nitty gritty advanced concept in your music that you feel like you put in there that is like for you and you're like really proud of? But in this instance, it's more like, what's the thing that you keep doing in your music that you're very annoyed at yourself that you keep doing it, but it's like kind of your signature at this point?
Well, there's actually a lot of those for me. Because I'm a pretty hyper individualistic person, and I'm like, when I write music, I'm always like, okay, what are all the ways I can make myself unique? But in reference to today, this orchestra piece I wrote, like, when I think of original music, and when music goes on in my head, the time feel never stays the same. I always think in like just different groupings of 3s and 2s. So I have this one line that goes from like feeling like it's in 3 to feeling like it's in 4, and then it's like just one. It's like I'll even sing it to you. It's like ba da 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 da. Like that's really a terrible rendering of what I just. But like I just, for me, that's not in like 4, right? What's frustrating about that is, as a composer, you don't get your players don't get lots of time with your music, and music that changes from 3/8 to 3/4 to 5/8, like, is. Or it just changes. The music that just changes time feel is hard to read initially. So it's frustrating because I don't feel like I can write any other way. Like I don't. When I write concert music for musicians, I don't ever think I'll write a piece in one time signature. It's just not how I hear music, and so it gets frustrating because I'm just like, why can't I just write something easy? But so I guess that yeah. So you were that's what you were asking, kind of like, what's an aspect of my music I get frustrated by, or like
well, yeah, like something that makes it I guess kind of your signature.
Yeah. So I would say like really jagged time feel is one of my signatures. In respect to Shift, the 3 of us have a lot of signatures. Many of the signatures are actually Benji Scaloot's writing, because Benji Scaloot has written a lot of the foundations of our songs, and Matt, our other member, and I, we'll usually assemble those pun intended, we have
there you
a
go.
song called Assemble. We'll usually assemble those together in a song, like all of Ben's ideas, and then kind of work from there. And one of those signatures is a kind of harmony called ninth chords, which are just so absolutely beautiful. And I would say that is a signature of my writing right now, because Ben has influenced me a lot. And I don't know. I also in my work really, really like to make people feel things deeply. I have trouble sometimes communicating with people because I only feel things deeply. And not everyone operates that way. And feeling things deeply is a gift and a curse in a lot of ways. But I'm obsessed with music that makes me feel something, but not slightly, feel it really hard. So there's like 3 answers to your question.
Yeah. Let's go even deeper into this inside baseball conversation. What are you using to compose?
Great question. If I had to give one answer, it's a piano. Almost 90% of the time, it's a piano. But the real true answer is it depends on the project. I just did a score for a horror film, and originally I was going to write it all on cello and just multi-track it. But the more I watched the film, the more I was like, this needs electronics. So I wrote it exclusively on my modular synthesizer without keyboard. Because because I'm a keyboard player, that is probably my primary voice, is playing keys. But having the limitation of not being able to use that as a crutch and just sort of thinking almost exclusively in textures is really, really helpful. And I felt like that project called for it. Other projects require me to just use my ear and don't use an instrument. So that's what I did with this orchestra piece. And that it's really, honestly, whenever I start a project, my first question is what limitations am I working under? Because if I can do anything, if I have a piano and I have my cello and I have my electronics and I have all of my virtual sounds and virtual synths and all of that, I'm not going to get anything done because I'm going to spend way too long on one bar.
Yeah. I call it the sandbox problem.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That is, this is a very, very common creative issue. And I think a lot of people really, really get stuck. Like, people who are intensely creative get stuck because they're like, oh, I have so many ideas all the time and I just want to produce them, but I just simply can't get myself to do it because the thought of starting it is so damn heavy. But so that's why you got to start by making the load as light as possible, and giving yourself just a wrench to do the job. You know.
This is, because it's not just making music. You also write songs and shift. You have a lot of words that you're involved with. I was at your composition recital, and there's a lot of words involved with it. Poetry is a big part of the composition thing, even if like the piece doesn't necessarily have words. Like, so tell me about your relationship with words and poetry and how that makes its way in.
I'm so glad you asked this question. I love words. I'm obsessed actually with words, and punctuation lately has gotten me. I don't really do visual art, but I do visual art in secret. And the visual art I draw always has like words on it, and I always put really odd punctuation because I'm just obsessed with the implications of that.
Because it's time.
Yeah, it's
You're
all
affecting time.
It's all about time, exactly. I would say that I am a writer, like words writer. I'm not. I wouldn't identify as a poet. Like I write poetry, but I'm actually I just started working on writing a sci-fi novel, because words like music for me communicate better than I can in person. I actually find I have a lot of the time interacting with people, I have a hard time finding the right words to say in a conversation, unless I'm just like really actually talking about myself, like in this setting. I have just such a hard time trying to say my thoughts right, and I'm always obsessed with trying to communicate as effectively as I can, which is a great skill for a composer, I think. So writing words for me has always been a great comfort, because I can write exactly what I want people to hear. So talking about words with music, words are inherently musical. Mm-hmm. And so I don't consider myself a great lyricist. I think I've written some great lyrics, but a lot of the lyrics I write, especially for my EP, for example, has it all has songs on it, but I'm not happy with the lyrics, right? Because I just feel like I was trying to do something that is not my lyrical voice. Mm. But what I've discovered as my lyrical voice is using words based on not only the sound of those words, but the feeling that the sound of those words elicits. For example, we have Shiv just recorded a song called Jagged and Bold, which is the title of our next project also. Which
I also got to experience, and it was very awesome.
Yeah, you did. That's one of the few times people have heard that, but there's a lyric in that I keep thinking of, where I say Barker's Bonder in the snifting statch. Still Barker's Bonder in the snifting statch. That doesn't mean anything, but to me, when I'm singing that, it means exactly what I want it to. And it just kind of, I mean, I think listeners can interpret that however they want, and you're correct. But so for me, words are definitely about sound when I'm using them in music, more so than their actual meaning. But I don't know. It also changes. Yeah. It changes from every project. Like, all the answers I'm giving you are definitely variables.
Yes, exactly. And something that I always, I hope that the listeners know, but I hope that you yourself also know, is that like this is a time capsule, and that what we are recording right now is you at this exact moment. And you could not agree with any of this tomorrow or a week from now or a year from now. And this is where you are right at this moment. And we are seeing but a sliver of who this person is.
Yeah, but I mean, that's music, right? Like you take Creep, for example, the song by Radiohead. Great fucking song. Yeah. I'm gonna be real. That song gets a lot of hate, but it's a great fucking song. Yeah. But every single member of Radiohead hates that song, because they're like, this is not us at all. But it is. It's a slice of who they were at one point. Every piece of art is like that. I had to drop a Radiohead reference in this episode because you're interviewing me.
Yeah, well, you're also in my studio, so Radiohead will inevitably be mentioned anyways.
Excellent.
What is something about you that people don't normally know?
Oh, wow. I'm kind of an open book, I think. Man, that's one I'll have to think about just a second. Like, I really like Taylor Swift.
Yeah.
That's something that most people don't know about me. I really do quite like Taylor Swift. That's my answer for right now. I think my true answer is that I am a radical introvert. Maybe. I don't know if people pick up on that usually. I feel like I'm pretty personable. But from everything I've already said in this podcast, I do feel like I've been screaming the introvert. Man, I'm just sort of rambling while I actually think of a real answer.
That's okay. So let me ramble while something probably comes to mind, is that like doing music is an incredibly introverted thing to do, and especially composing, right? So like, yeah, and you think that like, oh, but you perform, like that's incredibly extroverted. You go up on stage and people like are all looking at you, and like, yeah, that's a fragment of the time spent doing music. Mm-hmm. The rest of it is being in a room by yourself, honing something, just like transforming an experience into another one by yourself.
Yeah.
And sometimes other people get to hear it if you're like doing lessons or you're just trying to get someone else's opinion. But the rest of the time, it's just yourself and your computer, yourself and your instrument, yourself like, and your ears. And like, yeah, we spend a lot of time by ourselves doing the thing. And yeah, it makes us not very good with other people sometimes.
It does. It's one of the things I've noticed, particularly about electronic music, actually, because so much of music is a performative art, where, you know, you, even if you write music, like a lot of the times you are performing it too, or someone else is performing it. And the attention in those performances is on the performer and you, or just you if you're the performer. And that, what's interesting about electronic music, and especially like DJing, the goal of the DJ is to perform, but completely disappear. In the act. At least that's kind of what I've noticed. I've noticed that electronic music too, like the producer, so many producers just create in their bedroom, don't perform or any, and that's fine, and or sometimes don't even release their music. And that's really fascinating to me. Because I think that is actually something that's somewhat inherent to the electronic medium. I don't know a lot of like electronic musicians who are stars. There are great, very famous electronic musicians like Aphex Twin, for example, but Aphex Twin is not a star. Aphex Twin's not Prince, right? Like, so I think the act of electronic music is kind of so about the act of disappearing. Yeah.
And that the product or the finished thing is this like, because that's the thing, it's like we can't really perform it because we're just like sticking things in time.
Yeah, exactly.
And like it can only exist in the way that the computer reproduces it, but like you can't do that with an instrument necessarily. Like you have all of these things and textures and sounds and whatever that like can only happen in there.
Precisely.
And so like, sure, you could orchestrate it for an orchestra or something, but like that's also not the same thing.
Well, because it deals with real people performing it. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, yeah, like electronic music is this like, sorry, I have to just like hit play and like, and like, yeah, there are parts of it that you could like, all right, well, this has like a synth part that I can play on the keyboard, but like the rest of it is just happening because that's how it was shaped.
Yeah. Well, and you've seen me perform electronic music live too. Like and you've performed electronic music live. Like it's not like that doesn't happen, obviously. But it is just, it's setting up the machine to do it for you, right?
Yeah. That's what we do as composers.
Exactly. It's just such a fascinating interaction. And so this actually opens up a somewhat larger conversation too, because we are, over the weekend, which I put over the weekend in quotes, over the weekend, AI has exploded. Mm-hmm. Not actually over this weekend, but basically, it just happened so quickly. And this, more and more, the question of, is it life becomes pertinent. Mm-hmm. Like, is the computer a performer? That's the next question, right? Mm-hmm. Or I think, and I think too, if we're talking about music and we're talking about, and if we're talking about the future of music, like it so much of it lies in this, in artificial beings performing it in new and unique ways. And I think honestly, within my lifetime, I'm 22, and if I don't join the 27 club, within my lifetime, there will be, AI will eventually be considered life, I think. I'm in no means, I think, qualified to predict the future, but that is my personal prediction. I don't know. What do you think of that?
Hold that thought.
Okay.
That is a conversation for the next podcast.
No way.
We'll put a flag there. Okay. Because I have to get to the questions that make bit depth.
Oh, yes, of course. I tangent. That is my thing.
That's okay. And we will tangent. But first, what is the role of spirituality or religion in your life? So
while you were talking, I was thinking about what is the thing that people don't really usually know about me. God is very, I would say, important to me. I identify as pretty much an atheist. Mm-hmm. A lot of people, I've said agnostic in the past, but I'm pretty sure in my belief that God doesn't exist, personally. That isn't to say that anyone's wrong for believing that God exists, because honestly, no one really has the authority to say, because we're only human. But spirituality and religion fascinates me. I grew up in the Nazarene church, where I believed in God and Jesus for quite a while. And I still am in love with the idea of Jesus Christ. I think that sort of Messiah figure is really, really compelling. And actually, I think every human, if they look within themselves, has a Messiah figure. That's just an inherent human trait. But so, I work at a church. I work at a Catholic church. Religion fascinates me because it's, right now, I feel somewhat excluded from it, in a sense that I've excluded myself from it. But I look at people who have so much profound impact and relationship with God or whoever they believe to be God. And I often envy that. I have that in my own ways. Like music's my religion. But I think defining my relationship to spirituality, I would consider myself a theologian who is atheist. Mm-hmm. I really enjoy interpreting what like religious text is trying to say. Mm-hmm. I don't have much experience with non-Western religion. I wish I did. It's just one of those things that I'm like kind of sleeping on. But I would not say that religion does play into my music in that me going to church is creating music. Mm-hmm. So that's maybe what is the role that spirituality and religion has in my life is I go to church by writing and playing shows and participating in music.
Yeah. What is your definition of God?
So the universe theoretically started with a giant big bang, right? And it's expanded for a while. I think scientists have recently concluded that it's not expanding anymore. I'm not sure about the facts on that, but if it is, whether it is or isn't, the universe itself is an expanding and contracting wave. Planets turn, and everything in the universe vibrates. To me, that is God, is everything vibrating. And so I guess then that means that my answer is the universe and everything is God. But if there's someone, because God is someone you put faith into, and if there's something I put faith into, it's the chaos of the universe. And miracles are, to me, what I call universe moments, where things just line up exactly right for a certain circumstance to happen. Hence why humans are on this planet. Like, what the fuck? So to me, the vibrations of everything is God. The vibrations of the universe, the expanding, contracting, the back and forth, that's what created humanity. So the creator then is a sine wave.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. What is free will?
I've been kind of back and forth on this lately. This is actually something I've been thinking about. I've been reading Dostoevsky, who wrote this. The last one I read was Notes from Underground, which is this book, this is a short novella that he wrote, kind of pushing against the Enlightenment in Russia. So the Enlightenment in Russia in the mid 19th century was like, there was this period where the writer Chernyshevsky was kind of like, well, we've discovered through new scientific discoveries and this industrialization of our culture, like we've discovered that the choices we make are because of a certain set of synapses firing and a certain set of biological criteria. Dostoevsky pushes back against that, saying, well, that means that we have no free will. If everything is, in fact, and the Chernyshevsky perspective is kind of a very atheist perspective, because it's just like, well, the chaos of the universe created us, and there's this kind of determined. There's almost this determined, like every action that we make is actually a reaction to something else. A certain set of criteria, and because our biology is made a certain way, it's really breaking it down to like chemical basis, and Dostoevsky pushes back against that, and this is really tangential, isn't it?
Yeah, no, but it's part of it.
So like, I've been thinking a lot about that because I really don't know what my perspective is on free will. Like, I think it's better. I think everyone right now is better off assuming that we have the freedom to make our own choices. Even if, and it's not a question of whether that's true or not, because I'm not sure that question, at least to me, matters. I think if I decide that the decisions I make are because of my own free will, then I'm a happier person, to be honest. That said, there's a lot of factors in everyone's lives that push them to be who they are, and if I lost my legs or something, that would constrain my decision making quite a lot, and that's real. But if I lose my legs, that doesn't mean I lose free will. Right. It's just, it's a creative limitation. It's like what I was saying earlier is just, if I can minimize my tool set, I almost gain free will because I'm working within this world where I make, all I do is, make decisions, based on a certain set of criteria. That's the human experience. Yeah. So I guess that's where I'm at on free will. Is I would just rather assume that I have free will rather than really try and prove that I don't.
Sure. And then the creative limitations come from everything that is around you in life. It doesn't even have to be like losing your legs, but like just the fact that you were,
God forbid,
born in the United States versus South America, or
exactly.
Yeah.
That's true.
What do you think happens when we die?
So I saw someone die once. My mentor, Jeff Boydston, incredible musician, incredible guy. We were hanging out once, and he ripped his bong and fell over and died. And everyone's afraid of death. If we deny that we're afraid of death, I think that we're kind of lying to ourselves. But I was afraid of the idea of confronting my fear of death. But when he died in front of me, I saw his soul leave his body. And as I said, I'm kind of an atheist, so I don't really believe in that kind of thing. But like, I witnessed life leave the human physical form. I still don't know what that means. I don't know if but I think what happens after we die is we live in other people. Frank Herbert writes in Dune, many of his characters are really deeply connected with their family, their past selves, in a somewhat supernatural way because they're tripping on this magical drug called spice. But like there's like a lot of these characters in Dune go crazy because they get piloted by these family members or people in their lives that have died, that their consciousness like lives in them. I kind of believe that that's how it works. Jeff, my mentor, who passed away, like he is still alive because he's in his consciousness is within me in a lot of ways. And his consciousness is within his daughter and, anyone else who he's like your consciousness spreads. If I'm going to speculate about my experience when I die, I do believe that it's just going to be lights out. That's terrifying to me. That's fucking terrifying. But oh god, I just kicked the mic stand. I think that's what's happened. That's just what happens. But I take comfort in the fact that the people that I know that live on past me will inherit me in some form or fashion. I'm not Jeff, and I haven't inherited everything about Jeff, but I've inherited parts of Jeff that shape who I am. And that has happened not only during his time alive, but definitely after not only the time that he's been dead, but also the time that he was alive. So, yeah, I don't really believe in an afterlife. I'd like to believe in reincarnation. I think that would be fun. Sometimes I think about like I would love to be reincarnated as a fucking spider or something. I love spiders. So I guess I'll find out.
Yeah. Just to add a little side note is that the lights out seems terrifying. You do it every night.
That's true. That's true. I mean, you dream? I mean, not always.
Not always.
And then
when you wake up, you don't remember sure, you sometimes you remember your dream.
Yeah.
But also as soon as you try to remember it, you don't. So it becomes effectively lights out. Mm-hmm. So what difference does it make?
Truly. And part of me wonders, there might be something way bigger than us going on. That might mean that there's God. That might mean that there's Christian God. I don't know if my belief really affects whether or not there's an afterlife or not, I choose to believe that there's not, just so I can try and make the most out of my life here and however long I live. But we do go to sleep every night. So maybe when we die, we're in a perpetual dream state. I don't know.
What difference does it make?
What difference does it make, indeed?
To your own subjective experience. How do you determine what good behavior is?
Yeah, so I usually try and... My morality is pretty deeply based in Christianity because I was raised Christian. Mm-hmm. I'm very, very much about... And it's a very West. I feel like it's just I'm very, very much about love is. There's a Bible verse that's love is patient, love is kind, love does not want or envy and all that. I very much I subscribe to that theory. I think love is kind of the basis of human goodness. Making decisions out of hate generally is not what I would consider to be good. But when I think about, pragmatically, when I think about making good decisions, I try to make decisions that are going to have the most beneficial outcome to mostly my own life, actually. I've had a lot of us have had this, a lot of us who were raised Christian too, have this really, a lot of pressure on us to make decisions that benefit others at the expense of ourselves, and I don't actually think that is inherently good. I think generosity and self-sacrifice is good, but not inherently, if that makes sense. I don't know. I try and make. I'd like to think that I'm a good person, so I try to make decisions. And I think there's a deep down, most people are good people who are sometimes driven by the wrong things. But for me, I try to be driven by what is most true to myself, not at the expense of others. If that makes sense.
Yeah. How do we reduce the division between people?
Talk. Don't be afraid to say hard things. Don't be afraid to have hard conversations. Don't be afraid to disagree with someone. Don't be afraid to yell. Well, to an extent. I mean, don't be an asshole. Get the fuck off your phone is pertinent.
Yeah.
That is a huge divide between people. Your phone allows you to be stuck in yourself. That's why it's so depressing, because as I've said earlier, that one of the most important aspects of human, if not the most important aspect of human existence, is your relationships with people. And if your relationships with people are defined by your relationships with them on social media, that's really, social media is about a relationship that you have with yourself. I understand that I'm making a pretty blanket statement in that, and if people disagree with me, I'd love to talk more about that, but I'm just like, our phones let us get so in ourselves, and when we get so in ourselves and so obsessed with what we like, what we are, what opinions we have, what makes us laugh, and it's not fueled by our interactions with the people physically around us, we learn to, we learn to hate ourselves. Even if it doesn't feel like it does, we just start to get so obsessed with ourselves that we hate it. Does that make sense? It's like, yeah. So I think right now the divide, like, I think anyone on the political spectrum will agree with me right now that social media has made us so radicalized and so unwilling to budge in our radicalization. And not even that, like, I think discussions don't have to mean either party changes their opinion. Discussions are about understanding people. Talking is about understanding people. So that's how we reduce the divide. Don't be afraid to talk.
Yeah. Do you believe humans are evil by nature?
No. I don't believe they're good by nature either. That's like asking, is a dog good by nature? I guess some people would say that that's true. I don't know. Okay. I was really going to just try and give a simple answer to this, but I don't know if I can. You're asking complex questions.
They don't have simple answers. That's the point.
Do I think humans are... I think humanity exhibits patterns that are quite evil. For example, if you look at who ends up in power in pretty much every moment in history, it's always people whose minds are built in such a way that they seek that power, and oftentimes it's built, the people who are in power are privileged, and oftentimes the people who are in power forget the people that aren't and make decisions that continually increase the power divide. That has happened throughout history and will continue to happen, in my opinion. I can pretty confidently say that is a pattern of human history. Reading a lot, if you're someone who reads as much science fiction as I do, it can make you really cynical about that fact, because almost every science fiction novel is about, is partly about power struggle and humans, and it's almost always the same story. I would say even the Bible is very, very often about the power struggle between humans. As long as there's people who have power and authority over other people, then it's always going to be easy for evil to exist. There's a lot of implications if we completely removed power from the equation. There's a book called The Dispossessed by Ursula Le Guin that really speaks well on this issue. The Dispossessed is about a society that has no concept of ownership. And there's implications about that that I would just invite listeners to read about. The Dispossessed is my number one book I've read this year. But I don't know. So I do think that, and there's patterns beyond that, but I think a lot of it does just boil down to the people in power want to maintain that power, and that is inherently evil. But everyone wants control over their lives, and sometimes people are born like Elon Musk, who are just obsessed with having all of it, having all of wealth, or anyone who decides to run for president is mentally ill, because their brain is designed to want that kind of power. That's nothing. I don't mean to insult presidents like that, although
I do.
Yeah. I don't know. It's a little bit sus, but you know what I mean? Like that lust for this authority over massive groups of people, that's gotta be evil. It's gotta be evil. And fucking war, what is it good for? Absolutely nothing.
Yeah. Due to time, I have to skip one of these questions
okay.
or two, but getting positive then.
Yay!
What makes you content?
Two things. I said earlier that nothing brings me as much satisfaction. I basically said nothing brings me as much satisfaction as music. Like, the only thing I know is music. But I'd like to add to that, because my partner, who's incredible, their name is Amy Kynard, changed my life in countless ways. But they made me realize that I could be passionate about another human being, like passionate about making another human being happy, like legitimately as much as I am passionate about making music. Like, I am as passionate about maintaining my relationship with my partner as composing. And that's big. That's scary for me. But it's affected my relationships with other people. And that's why I said earlier is relationships are the most important aspect of human existence. So what makes me content is having good relationships with people. And having a good relationship with my partner, of course, Amy makes me very content a lot of the time. They're not my sole source of content because I don't know if that's particularly healthy if they were.
A lot of pressure to put on someone.
Yeah, a lot of pressure to put on someone, exactly. But like it makes me content to put in the work to have relationships with the people that bring value to my life. And similarly with music, like it makes me content to put in a lot of work to make good music. But music is relational. It's all about relationships. It's communicating what you feel to sometimes just yourself, but the rest of the world too.
Yeah.
That makes me content in my life. Seeing in the talking beyond my own life, what makes me content is knowing that there's other artists out there. Things like this podcast, people like you. That makes me very content.
Awesome. 2 more questions for you.
Yay! I love questions.
What advice do you have for people in general?
For people in general, don't underestimate the importance of the people in your life. They really do shape who you are, and you are never alone. That's just a blanket fact. I think that's my advice on Tuesday. And also just stop fucking doing the things that you don't love doing. Like, obviously do what you gotta do, but like, I don't know, man. If you have a craving to do something awesome, just fucking do it. You've got probably like 80 years on this planet. That's not that much time. What the fuck are you doing not enjoying it?
Yeah. Lastly, potentially most importantly, cake or pie?
Depends on the kind of cake. Depends on the day of the week. And it depends on the kind of pie also. This is maybe the hardest question you asked.
I know. That's why it's last.
Cake or pie? Well, I'm gonna say on theme with our conversations, not only before the podcast, but somewhat during, the cake is a lie. And, my answer, okay, actually, you know what my answer is? My answer is pie, because rhubarb pie exists and that shit's fucking awesome. That shit is fucking awesome. If you don't like, I understand any listener or yourself who doesn't like rhubarb pie, but it's so fucking good to me. I love rhubarb pie. So that's my answer.
There we go. Ben, thank you so much for doing this with me.
Of course. This has been such a pleasure. I love talking.
Where can people find you and your things?
I'm on social media. At my band is shift.band on Instagram. That is my passion project. So if you want to know what I do, look at Shift. If you want to know what I personally do, you can follow my other Instagram, Brosfeld, Brosfeld, Brosfeld. And I'm also on Spotify, Ben Rosfeld. I'm on Apple Music as Ben Rosfeld. And wherever else other music platforms are available. And I'm also on those. And just drop me a line. Actually, on again, I really mostly I don't love social media. But I do communicate on Instagram. So just DM me on Instagram. Be like, I heard you on Bit Depth. Where can I hear your classical music? Where can I hear your whatever? Because I do have a lot of music that's just not online.
Yeah, same.
Yeah.
Because that shit is expensive to get recorded, and it's expensive to get all the musicians in and like have them rehearse enough and like
Of course.
pay them so that they have rehearsed enough that you are happy with the recording, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, that's a really big part of it, is being happy with it. Is there's a lot of music I'm out there that I just like, I don't need the public to hear this. I think it's okay, but like,
yeah. Once again, seriously, thank you for doing this with me.
Yeah.
I'm Santiago Ramones.
I'm Benjamin Rosfeld.
What track is playing at the end of this? I've played Shift's things on here whenever school was on here, so maybe some Benjamin Rosfeld tracks, or just one of them.
Yeah. Is this bit on the recording?
Yeah.
Well, I'll send you a track that is a recent track from Shift's new album. So if you like Shift, our first album, Timelines, you will love Jagged and Bold, which is our second album that we're working on. It's fucking insane and a complete breakaway from a lot of what we're doing on Timelines. But I will send you a track called The Listener.
Sweet.
And that you can play that at the end. It's great. And it's really short.
The exclusive on Bit Depth.
Yeah, exclusively on Bit Depth, because the album's coming out much later, like probably this summer.
I'm sick, running long streams of words from meaningless bottles of earth, finding the wrong songs being heard from shaking unsaid since my birth, compromise self-worth. That's it, flowers die at your feet, mothers cry when they meet. You're ever pushing, ever pulling, ever trolling, voice under a thin white sheet. And so the works that lies in the ear, embodied catastrophic, allotopic, philosophic, economic, electronic, alcoholic, pathologic, two psychotic minds, discerner logic. I struggle to real. There's struggle when we yield to shields of steel. We wield in fields, can't feel, can't heal, can't seal the deal with forces the real we cannot reveal. Well, the story is this heaven or oh, you're everywhere. There's Conjure in the Herald and Parker's in the Moor. I've buttered and I've barreled, and you're the listener. Listen.
You can find everything that I do on my website, santiagoramones.com. I make music and produce audio. The music you're hearing now is music I made. You can listen to official releases by Santiago Ramones on Spotify, Apple Music, and the other streaming places. Or you can support me directly by buying my music on Bandcamp. I'm working on Hypothetical, my first singer-songwriter album, so if you'd like to hear that at some point, I'm so close, I promise. There are lots of ways to support me on my website. There's a Discord server in which we discuss deep topics from the podcast, but it's also a community of beautiful human beings. All the links to these things are on my website, santiagoramones.com. Please take a moment to rate and review the podcast on Apple Podcasts if you listen there. It means a lot to me to hear what you have to say about it, and you're helping me without having to spend a single cent on me. I want to help the world have deeper conversations, so thank you for listening to and supporting Bit Depth. I was in the podcast with my 3 things. They shape my life philosophy. Those 3 things are: love never fails, it's going to be okay, I might be wrong.